Hydrofracking and the Environment. The American landscape is dotted with hundreds of thousands of new wells and drilling rigs as the country scrambles to tap into this century's gold rush for natural gas. The gas has always been there, of course, trapped deep underground in countless tiny bubbles, like frozen spills of seltzer water between thin layers of shell rock. But drilling companies have only in recent years developed techniques to unlock the enormous reserves, supposedly thought to be enough to supply the country with gas for heating buildings, generating electricity, and powering vehicles for up to 100 years. So energy companies are clamoring to drill, and they are getting rare support from their usual sparring partners. Environmentalists say using natural gas will help slow climate change because it burns more cleanly than coal and oil. Lawmakers hailed the gas as a source of jobs. They also see it as a way to wean the United States from its dependency on other countries for oil. But the relatively new drilling method, known as high-volume horizontal hydraulic fracturing, or hydrofracking, carries significant environmental risks. It involves injecting huge amounts of water mixed with sand and chemicals at high pressures to break up rock formations and release the gas. With hydrofracking, a well can produce over 1 million gallons of wastewater that is often laced with highly corrosive salts, carcinogens like benzene, and radioactive elements like radium, all of which can occur naturally thousands of feet underground. Other carcinogenic materials can be added to the wastewater by the chemicals used in the hydrofracking itself. While the existence of the toxic waste has been reported, thousands of internal documents obtained by the New York Times from the Environmental Protection Agency, state regulators, and drillers show that the dangers to the environment and health are greater than previously understood. The documents reveal that the wastewater, which is sometimes hauled to sewage plants not designed to treat it, and then discharged into rivers that supply drinking water, contains radioactivity at levels higher than previously known, and far higher than the level that federal regulators say is safe for these treatment plants to handle. Other documents and interviews show that many EPA scientists are alarmed, warning that the drilling waste is a threat to drinking water in Pennsylvania. Their concern is based partly on a 2009 study, never made public, written by an EPA consultant who concluded that some sewage treatment plants were incapable of removing certain drilling waste contaminants and were probably violating the law. The Times also found never reported studies by the EPA and a confidential study by the drilling industry that all concluded that radioactivity in drilling waste cannot be fully diluted in rivers and other waterways. But the EPA has not intervened. In fact, federal and state regulators are allowing most sewage treatment plants that accept drilling waste not to test for radioactivity, and most drinking water intake plants downstream from those sewage treatment plants in Pennsylvania, with the blessing of regulators, have not tested for radioactivity since before 2006, even though the drilling boom began in 2008. In other words, there is no way of guaranteeing that the drinking water taken in by all these plants is safe, and that has experts very worried. "We're burning the furniture to heat the house," said John H. Quigley, who left last month as Secretary of Pennsylvania's Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. In shifting away from coal and toward natural gas, we're trying for cleaner air, but we're producing massive amounts of toxic wastewater with salts and naturally occurring radioactive materials. It's not clear we have a plan for properly handling this waste. The risks are particularly severe in Pennsylvania, which has seen a sharp increase in drilling, with roughly 71,000 active gas wells, up from about 36,000 in 2000. The level of radioactivity in the wastewater has sometimes been hundreds or even thousands of times the maximum allowed. by the federal standard for drinking water. While people clearly do not drink drilling wastewater, the reason to use a drinking water standard for comparison is that there is no comprehensive federal standard for what constitutes safe levels of radioactivity in drilling wastewater. Drillers trucked at least half of this waste to public sewage treatment plants in Pennsylvania in 2008 and 2009, according to state officials. Some of it has been sent to other states, including New York and West Virginia, and yet sewage treatment plant operators say they are far less capable of removing radioactive contaminants and most other toxic substances. Indeed, most of these faculties cannot remove enough of the radioactive material to meet federal drinking water standards before discharging the wastewater into rivers, sometimes just miles upstream from drinking water intake plants. In Pennsylvania, these treatment plants discharged waste into some of the state's major river basins. Greater amounts of the wastewater went into one river, which provides drinking water to more than 800,000 people in the western part of the state, including Pittsburgh, and to another river which feeds into Chesapeake Bay and provides drinking water to more than 6 million people, including some in Harrisburg and Baltimore. Lower amounts have been discharged into the Delaware River, which provides drinking water for more than 15 million people in Philadelphia and eastern Pennsylvania. In New York, the wastewater was sent to at least one plant that discharges into southern Cayuga Lake near Ithaca, and another that discharges into Owasco Outlet near Auburn. In West Virginia, a plant in Wheeling discharged gas drilling wastewater into the Ohio River. Hydrofracking impacts associated with health problems, as well as widespread air and water contamination, have been reported in at least a dozen states, said Walter Hang, president of Toxics Targeting, a business in Ithaca, New York, that compiles data on gas drilling. And while Pennsylvania is an extreme case, the risks posed by hydrofracking extend across the country. There were more than 493,000 active natural gas wells in the United States in 2009, almost double the number in 1990. Around 90% have used hydrofracking to get more gas flowing, according to the drilling industry. Gas has seeped into underground drinking water supplies in at least 5 states, including Colorado, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, and West Virginia, and residents blamed natural gas drilling. Air pollution caused by natural gas drilling is a growing threat too. Wyoming, for example, failed in 2009 to meet federal standards for air quality for the first time in its history, partly because of the fumes containing benzene and another solvent from roughly 27,000 wells, the vast majority drilled in the past 5 years. In one sparsely populated county in Wyoming, which has some of the highest concentrations of whales, vapors reacting to sunlight have contributed to levels of ozone higher than those recorded in Houston and Los Angeles. Industry officials say any dangerous waste from the whales is theoretically handled in compliance with state and federal laws, adding that drilling companies are recycling more wastewater now. They also say that hydrofracking is well regulated by the states and that it has been used safely for decades. But hydrofracking technology has become more powerful and more widely used in recent years, producing far more wastewater. Some of the problems with this drilling, including its environmental impact and the challenge of disposing of waste, have been documented by ProPublica, the Associated Press, and other news organizations, especially out west. And recent incidents underscore the dangers. In late 2008, drilling and coal mine waste released during a drought so overwhelmed a river that local officials advised people in the Pittsburgh area to drink bottled water. EPA officials described the incident in an internal memorandum as one of the largest failures in U.S. history to supply clean drinking water to the public. In Texas, which now has approximately 93,000 natural gas wells, up from around 58,000 a dozen years ago. A hospital system in 6 counties with some of the heaviest drilling said in 2010 that it found a 25% asthma rate for young children, more than 3 times the state rate of approximately 7%. It's ruining us, said Kelly Gant, whose 14-year-old daughter and 11-year-old son have experienced severe asthma attacks, dizzy spells, and headaches since a compressor station and a gas well were set up about 2 years ago near her house in Bartonville, Texas. And yet, some say, for all its problems, natural gas offers some clear environmental advantages over coal, which is used more than any other fuel to generate electricity in the United States. Coal-fired power plants without updated equipment to capture pollutants are a major source of radioactive pollution. Coal mines annually produce millions of tons of toxic waste, but the hazards associated with natural gas production and drilling are far less understood than those associated with other fossil fuels, and the regulations have not kept pace with the natural gas industry's expansion. Pennsylvania, which sits atop an enormous reserve called the Marcellus Shale, has been called the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. This rock formation, roughly the size of Greece, lies more than a mile beneath the Appalachian landscape, from Virginia to the southern half of New York. It is believed to hold enough gas to supply the country's energy needs for heat and electricity at current consumption rates for more than 15 years. Drilling companies were issued roughly 3,300 Marcellus gas well permits in Pennsylvania last year, up from just 117 in 2007. This has brought thousands of jobs, 5-figure windfalls for residents who lease their land to the drillers, and revenue for a state that has struggled with budget deficits. It has also transformed the landscape of southwestern Pennsylvania and brought heavy burdens. Drilling derricks tower over barns, lining rural roads like feed silos. Drilling sites bustle around the clock with workers, some in yellow, hazardous material suits, and 18-wheelers haul equipment, water, and waste along back roads. The rigs announce their presence with the occasional boom and quiver of underground explosions, smelling like raw sewage mixed with gasoline. Drilling waste pits, some as large as a football field, sit close to homes. Anywhere from 10% to 40% of the water sent down the well during hydrofracking returns to the surface, carrying drilling chemicals, very high levels of salts, and, at times, naturally occurring radioactive material. While most states require drillers to dispose of this water in underground storage wells below impermeable rock layers, Pennsylvania has few such wells. It is the only state that has allowed drillers to discharge much of their waste through sewage treatment plants into rivers. Regulators have theorized that passing drilling waste through the plants is supposedly safe because most toxic material will settle during the treatment process into a sludge that can be trucked to a landfill, and whatever toxic material remains in the wastewater will be, hopefully, diluted when mixed into rivers. But some plants were taking such large amounts of waste with high salt levels in 2008 that downstream utilities started complaining that the river water was eating away at their machines. More than 1.3 billion gallons of wastewater was produced by Pennsylvania wells over the past 3 years, far more than has been previously disclosed. Most of this water, enough to cover Manhattan in 3 inches, was sent to treatment plants not equipped to remove many of the toxic materials in drilling waste. At least 12 sewage treatment plants in 3 states accepted gas industry wastewater and discharged waste that was only partly treated into rivers, lakes, and streams. Of more than 179 wells producing wastewater with high levels of radiation, at least 116 reported levels of radium or other radioactive materials 100 times as high as the levels set by federal drinking water standards. At least 15 wells produced wastewater carrying more than 1,000 times the amount of radioactive elements considered acceptable. The EPA and industry researchers say the biggest danger of radioactive waste is its potential to contaminate drinking water or enter the food chain through fish or farming. Once radium enters a person's body by eating, drinking, or breathing, it can cause cancer and other health problems, many federal studies show. Under federal law, testing for radioactivity in drinking water is required only at drinking water plants, but federal and state regulators have given nearly all drinking water intake faculties in Pennsylvania permission to test only once every 6 or 9 years. And in data from more than 65 intake plants downstream from some of the busiest drilling regions in the state, not one has tested for radioactivity since 2008, and most have not tested since at least 2005, before most of the drilling waste was being produced. And in 2009 and 2010, public sewage treatment plants directly upstream from some of these drinking water intake faculties accepted wastewater that contained radioactivity levels as high as 2,122 times the drinking water standard. But most sewage plants are not required to monitor for radioactive elements in the water they discharge, so there is virtually no data on such contaminants as water leaves these plants. Recently, Pennsylvania has tried to increase its oversight, doubling the number of regulators, improving well-designed requirements, and sharply decreasing how much drilling waste many treatment plants can accept or release. The state is considering whether to require treatment plants to begin monitoring for radioactivity in wastewater. Even so, as of last November, 31 inspectors were keeping tabs on more than 125,000 oil and gas wells. The new regulations also allowed at least 18 plants to continue accepting the higher amounts set by their original permits. Drilling contamination is entering the environment in Pennsylvania through spills too. In the past 3 years, at least 16 wells whose records showed high levels of radioactivity in the wastewater also reported spills, leaks, or failures of pits where hydrofracking fluid or waste is stored, according to state records. Gas producers are generally left to police themselves when it comes to spills. In Pennsylvania, regulators do not perform unannounced inspections to check for signs of spills. Gas producers report their own spills, write their own spill response plans, and lead their own cleanup efforts. A review of response plans for drilling projects at 4 Pennsylvania sites where there have been accidents in the past year found that these state-approved plans often appear to be in violation of the law. Hydrofracking possibly also causes earthquakes. Arkansas quake is its most powerful in 35 years. A 4.7 magnitude earthquake that researchers described as the largest in Arkansas in 35 years was recorded late Sunday night near Greenbrier. It was the latest in a swarm of quakes that has bedeviled the region since early last fall. The situation has garnered national attention because of its possible connection to natural gas hydrofracking drilling operations in the area. Researchers with the Arkansas Geological Survey have pointed out spatial and temporal relationships between the earthquakes and the use of injection wells, which are used to dispose of the wastewater left over from gas drilling. There is a growing body of research suggesting that injection wells can induce earthquakes, and there is some circumstantial evidence that this might be happening in Arkansas. And again, all these are more signs of the times, the end times transition days, which is a continuing day-by-day process of extraordinary changes happening all around the world. Everything is connected and everything is numbered. In other words, what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations? Revelation chapter 8, verse 10. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters. 11. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many humans died of the waters, because they were made bitter. Revelation chapter 16, verse 5. And I heard the angel of the waters say, Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art and was and shall be, because thou hast judged thus. 6. For they have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink, for they are worthy. 7. And I heard another out of the altar say, Even so, Lord God Almighty, true and righteous are thy judgments. 8. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and power was given unto him to scorch humans with fire. It's time for all prophecy to be fulfilled. The fourth angel comes quickly.